No, I mean, we kind of did that during the last bond of 2020 because we went through to Jefferson, which is why it's always been a concern for me as we had that number, we keep going through the scoping things on the Jefferson project and trying to stay within the number. I'll give the board credit. They've been holding firm on that number. But yeah, that's fine. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, it seems like obviously the biggest issues are always matching up scope and budget, and then during the planning process, it's always tough because the budget you do is based on the least amount of information, and as you develop the information, it gets more informed, and the reconciliation, and then the process of having the contractor do a budget. They come in at some point, and then you have a lot of times I think there's a third party cost consultant, and then their budgets are usually different, and then they reconcile that whole process. So yeah, we're familiar with that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So I think next steps will be for us to reach out. I'm sure we'll reach out to Kara about planning when that next meeting is. Time, and then we'll prepare the information.
So to that extent, Dan, how many openings do we have on our bond accountability? Are we full?
We're not full, so we definitely have the opportunity to add some more.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, if you guys, I think that's, another thing that's definitely been on the list of like looking to recruit some more. And if you guys have some good suggestions, I'd put that up as well. Kara, any questions?
Everybody's good. We'll go ahead and move on to our regularly scheduled agenda.
So what happens with that public comment?
That's really up to you. So
Yeah, I read that and I thought it was nice of that person to show the initiative and kind of put forward that. It's probably, I don't know how pertinent it is to the accountability committee, that level of specificness, but my thought was that it'd be interesting to pass that on to some of the engineers, mechanical electrical engineers that have been working on the projects.
Is the operations staff involved in the design of the buildings?
yes,
Oh, okay, so.
yes.
Oh,
I think, there's probably, to give some context to other folks, we received a written public comment that we shared with our VAC committee this afternoon. We received it this afternoon and sent it on. And the comment was surrounding let's say the complexity of the systems in our modernizations and what it takes to maintain those systems and operate the systems with the staff that we have and the staffing levels that we have from an operational perspective. And so, I think there's probably a lot to kind of touch on there. We've certainly talked a lot in the past about how modernization designs are based on not just, of course, our ed specs, our educational specifications, but also our design guidelines. Design guidelines talk a lot about the types of systems that go into the modernizations. And those design guidelines, for those of you that are in the design construction world or have been, they're based on our CSI specification visions, right? They're fairly technical. Those are updated regularly from lessons learned, from operations staff saying, hey, we've got an issue with this particular thing. Let's talk about changing what we asked for. There's a lot of different inputs into the updates for those design guidelines. And those inputs, of course, include our operations folks. In addition to that, for modernizations, spend a lot of time talking with internal stakeholders, including instant operations. So, I think that it's not an easily, sort of encapsulated topic in terms of how we address those issues, but we're happy to kind of get further into some of those details.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we would do anything. I mean, I used to get this a lot in my previous life too, you know, the operations folks would get something, I go, what engineer designed this thing, you know? So we try to bring them in.
And they're looking at it from a narrow scope,
Yeah, I
not a
mean,
broader.
I just, you know, the person sent us a letter, so I said like,
Yeah, and those new, more complex systems to somebody that's used to the other simpler ones. Look, you know, and then you have proprietary vendors for the controls. So rather than you messing with it, you got to bring in Siemens or whoever.
Yes.
And I think these systems maybe there is some more maintenance, but they're saving so much in energy and controllability and stuff that
And
there is a
that's
little
part
more
of it too,
maintenance.
right? Like there are other inputs into
Yeah.
choose, including things like our climate policy, right?
Right.
So we change our mechanical systems to address climate policy goals. We may be going to more complex systems, and we may be going to controls that have to be proprietary to achieve the goals that we need to
There'd
achieve.
be a third party that has to come in if you have issues. or
Absolutely. So,
programming.
and I think there's a lot to it. We do our best to have regular ongoing conversations with maintenance and operations. Maybe not everybody within those departments is part of all those conversations or is you know, exposed to that.
this is a conversation between the individual that sent us a letter and the staff that are involved. In the operation staff at whatever level they are. We need to have that conversation internally, but
Yeah, like I
it's
said, I
something
think
for us to, we don't usually look at the design anyway, really, so.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, we aren't drilled down anywhere near that level.
No, we don't go down there,
Specificness
but
or-
it is a valid point, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay, to just kind of move on. So, what you see on the presentation, of course, is the thing that we share with you every time, which is just to remind you that when we provide you with business equity utilization data, that there are some constraints to that data, that it represents the point in time. It is based on payments made and a certain amount of self-reporting. So there are always the potential for there to be inaccuracies, though of course we do our very best to ensure that it's accurate data. When we see that data is not showing up, we go and investigate, which is what we did recently. As we were pulling data for this report, we discovered that there was a communications issue between our payment or financial system of record, PeopleSoft, and Cobblestone, which is our contracting software. Those two systems have to talk together for us to get the data. They weren't talking very well in January. So what we've done is we have provided you data from December 31st of 2023. So it's a month prior to when we would normally have provided data. We will get you back up to our current data at the next report out, assuming that we've resolved the issue. But I don't think we're gonna see, oh, and I've been told the issue is now resolved. So unfortunately, we aren't able to change that right this moment, but hopefully by the next time we don't have any other issues and we can give you data. So I will go ahead and move on to our program updates. And we'll start with the equity. So that is at the top of the report. We actually have gone over 18% in our cumulative business equity data. And because this was new, I forgot to change the status at a glance from yellow to green. So if you were wondering, we should be all green. Pretty excited to be there. And you can see we had a pretty significant bump in our 12-month rolling. So that explains a little bit of why we pushed over. Our workforce equity is, basically a slight improvement on our minority utilization and pretty much staying the same for our female and apprenticeship in general. No real news there. There are any questions about equity? Okay.
So this Is this for the,
No, it's for all of them.
For all
I
of them.
thought it
Yeah,
was
so-
2012.
this is,
It's for everybody.
It's
Or just getting the totals for 2012? No,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
for I thought so,
everything
too.
to date.
It is
more or less.
everything.
Okay.
Cumulative is to date, the
Oh,
12 months
that's
we
great.
do on a rolling basis.
Yeah.
And then we can start kind of working our way down through the different programs for budget. For 2012, you know, we continue to tell you that we're closing it out. You'll see minor changes in terms of things disappearing from the under the forecast column. Grant monetization, we've cleaned that off. It's closed out or closed out financially anyway. We're working on closing out the Upperfield Improvement Program for our projects. We are reconciling our system of record e-builder with PeopleSoft, the financial system record, and our bank accounts to make sure that our cash actually matches what we have in our systems. So you're going to see numbers potentially change. You'll have seen some changes in this one from the last one, and you'll see them again in the next one. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that we really do have $480,000 roughly available to us. We are using those funds right now to address some old permits. As we go and clean out and make sure that everything is cleaned up and reconciled for 2012 projects. So until we get through all of that, we won't even consider talking about additional projects that could get funded with that couple $100,000.
So there was a story in the paper about the grant folks wanting lights in their field now. Get the field.
There's an interest in putting lights on the Grant Bowl.
The bowl.
And what we recently did, our Upperfield improvement, Upperfield, no, it's down here, Upperfield is up here, the Upperfield is the softball, baseball field, where we added the softball, we added lights to that baseball
Oh.
field. What they're looking for are lights at the bowl, which is where we have track and field, and we have football and soccer, or some soccer, I should say. And lacrosse, I don't want to miss the lacrosse. That is a conversation item, we'll talk about that a little bit as we
Okay.
kind of work our way through this, just briefly. Because we're going to start talking about 2017. Let me go ahead and change the next page here. So with 2017, we've spent just shy of $801 million. That's 86% of our total budget. The remaining funds are primarily encumbered or planning to be encumbered in Benson, in our health and safety projects, and in administration. We know that we have a little more than $18 million forecasted to come back from Lincoln. That's a relatively firm number. I say relatively, there's always, minor things that can come up during the first year of operations, or we discover something that we probably should have done, and we will make sure we correct that. So we're not going to take all of it back right away. We'll leave some in the same way that we did for Daniel or for Kellogg, so that we can address those sorts of things. But we will have a large amount of money coming back. We know that currently 10 million of our, sort of program contingency, which is where all those extra funds would come back to, is committed to matching Portland Clean Energy funds. We're still working through the details of that. You will start to see more of that in the future. But we also know that our board is very interested in potential other uses of those additional funds. There have been a lot of conversations about what those uses might be. One of the things that is being put forward is potentially lighting the grant. So those are conversations that we are going to continue to have about our contingency.
Are there
And
constraints of that, on what it can be spent on?
there are some constraints on what it can be spent on, and we typically go to bond council to confirm before we try to spend funds on anything that hasn't already been identified as a project.
For that bond period, what it was?
Yes, for that one. So those are things, for example, we added 2 projects that were athletics related, that were the replacing the grant track, and turf field, and then replacing the track at Buckman Park, which is Benson's track. Make sure I get the fees correct there. Both of those projects, the board asked us to use 2017 contingency funds to pay for those projects to be completed. We confirmed with bond council we could do that, and those projects are moving forward. So it's along those
It's a
lines.
capital expenditure, so I'm pretty sure that the lights would be.
It is a capital expenditure, and, again, a lot of it kind of comes down to how do we determine what our priorities are
Yeah.
for the contingency funds and where we should put those funds. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into 2020, but a little bit of a preview. I do want to also point out that in 2017, we did get $5.4 million in interest earnings that from the last fiscal year, so fiscal year ending in June of 23. And we don't know what will come. We never try to forecast our interest earnings in particular. That would be a complicated exercise. But it's always nice to get that additional boost in funds. And moving on to 2020.
Before you go, I couldn't find it. Why is the 57 million highlighted?
No, actually, I'm really, why did you say that? Because I meant to point out, that was an error. I didn't mean to have it highlighted. I was trying to get this out the door very
No problem.
quickly, and I forgot to remove the highlighting.
Okay.
So I'm not particularly pointing out Benson. Sorry, Armand. It just happened to still be there.
Okay. I couldn't find it in the notes.
I knew you were going to be the one to ask that, Greg, too. I knew that.
I lived up to that.
Yeah. I always made a note in my notes to talk about the highlighting.
Red or orange.
All right, so 2020 program. We have spent 455 million to date. That's 35%. Those of you with sharp eyes will know that we also spent 35% last time. Again, it's such a large number. Percentages don't necessarily change very quickly. I also want to note, we did receive $6.8 million in interest earnings in fiscal year 23 through 2020 on measure. Our interest earnings are based on the amount of funds that we currently have invested, because when we sell bonds, we of course can't keep all the money in a regular bank account. We go and we invest those funds and we get interest earnings of them, and we're not using them. We're waiting for that need to arise from the cash. So we anticipate seeing more interest earnings for 2020, simply because we have more cash on hand that is invested. And I have also started to talk a little bit about contingency and additional costs that we see coming for the 2020 funds. So I want to talk through that a little bit as well. You'll see some of that in notes. A couple things. There's a note on Benson. Benson splits bond measures. That note could equally be in 2017 as it is in 2020. We're going to talk a little bit more about Benson tonight. Armand here is going to give us a presentation on Benson, and we'll have some more information there. But we just wanted to note that there is some financial risk that could play out with our contingency for 2017 and or for 2020, right? So there's a little bit of crossing the bond measures with that particular project. For 2020 specifically, we do have projects that we are starting to refine our estimates of how much more money we're going to need to complete the scope that we set out. We've talked about this quite a bit, but costs have gone up dramatically from the time that we set aside funds and we started figuring out what we were going to do. And we also knew as we set out that scope that in many cases we couldn't really specifically define the scope. And so I'm going to talk about some of those a little bit. One of those, ADA. So our accessibility projects, where the scope was to provide accessibility to the main level of every school in the district. That entails going through every school and identifying not just what accessibility means, but how to achieve it. And so we had accessibility information already that gave us sort of, basic information to do some really basic costing. But as we go through and we define that scope, it becomes much more detailed in terms of what it is we have to do and what the challenges might be in doing that.
So if you prioritize these schools, you're not gonna get them all done, then,
We cannot get them done with the money that we set aside
So
for
is
the
that
ADA.
what you're looking at in the next one? Finish them up?
No, this is a contingency conversation,
Oh,
right?
strictly,
So
okay.
this is kind of where we start talking about contingency again. And you'll probably recall from the conversations that we had around the 2020 bond, we put a healthy amount into our contingency for exactly these sorts of reasons. So I've given you some numbers there that we are anticipating for ADA and SPED. SPED work, it works hand in hand with the ADA work. Some of the things that we're doing with SPED would be, for example, adding bathrooms to SPED classrooms that are specifically accessible for SPED students. They have a little more hardware, shall we say. So that work is being done at the same time. The other project that we are anticipating is significantly more money will be needed to complete the scope is our controls upgrades for our mechanical systems. And those were controls upgrades across the district as well. That is one that also had a little bit of, we'll call it squishiness to the scope, which is to say that we are upgrading our controls from pneumatic controls to DVC controls. And what that means is that some of our mechanical system components may not be compatible with DVC controls, and we will have to upgrade some of those components. So that adds a cost. We don't necessarily know what that cost is until we go and we scope things in detail. So we are looking at those numbers. We also know that we are anticipating an updated cost estimate for Jefferson based on the revised plan. We'll have a little bit more about Jefferson later on presentation. And so with all of these things, kind of talking about our contingency, what we'd like to do is we'd like to sit down with the BAC at one of the bond planning meetings and talk about the contingency of what it is we have available in 2017, in 2020, and talk about what we see as the potential uses of that contingency. So identify some of the risks that we are tracking internally, and also identify some of the things that the board has asked us, hey, do you have money to fund this?
So base less.
Yeah.
So I think they explained this before. So there's contingency, then there's unallocated project funds.
Yes, because we have buckets of money that we have set aside for specific types of projects. And so when we say, for
So
example.
could some of that unallocated be spent on like the ADA or the?
It's already pledged.
Okay.
Yeah, the unallocated, we have a bucket of unallocated ADA funds. Those funds were already taken into account for the work that will occur with
I
ADA.
remember you explained this before.
We just have not put them into a project in eBuilder specifically.
Right, okay.
So we will start to allocate, we have more projects coming up to set up for ADA, for controls, for security. Once we get those set up in eBuilder, that number will drop very quickly from the unallocated side and go up very quickly to the allocated infrastructure projects.
So it's other,
Same money, just moving places on the line.
okay.
Yep. Okay?
Okay.
And that was an awful lot of talking. Just one other thing I want to note, beyond budget is schedule. Which is to say, I just want to kind of quickly touch on where we are schedule-wise and some of our risks. Schedule, we know that MPG is on a tight schedule. We're going to talk about Benson's schedule here in our later presentation. Jefferson, of course, is developing a new schedule. We don't have that yet. And we are doing our comprehensive planning and design for Cleveland Ida B. Wells modernizations, but as a reminder, we don't have funding yet for construction. So any schedules that we put out there for those are, let's say, wildly theoretical, because if we didn't get the funding, then we would not be moving forward on those schedules. So just all that to say, you know, here's a little bit of update on the things that you guys care about, which is money, schedules, and, right?
Okay.
And Kara, you're gonna jump in if you have any questions. Because we're just blowing right through this.
Or any
Blow
update on
through
your,
it. It's great.
or any update on your dog?
I just managed to get eye drops in his eye and not get bit in the face, so that was exciting.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to our technology project updates, and I am going to stop sharing, and Jody is going to start sharing. Yes,
Where would you like me? Do you want me to move up there, or do you want me to share from here?
you can share from your computer. You're already in the
Okay.
meeting. Yep. So.
Let's see, Johnny, should I keep my sound off? Is my sound gonna convey over the current? Or do you want me to turn my sound on?
I think you could turn it on.
Kara, can you hear me from here?
Yeah, I can actually hear you, and like the camera shifted, so I've got everything I need.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is use video. So so for the technology project, we have a lot of different scope, big technology into schools. We have split up into different segments, so school groups, which we've previously talked about. And we have a short 3-minute video that we wanted to show you to give a little bit of context to the types of work that we are implementing in the schools. And then we'll go over the budget and we'll go over the schedulings in the school. So, go ahead and share my screen. One moment. Pull it up from the other location. Full screen. Let me know if you can hear the sound on the audio in a second. These are also photos from our schools, so just in case, just give a look at context there.
first.
And that microphone is actually around the neck on the lanyard, so it's easy for the teachers to utilize. And this is the rationale on audio amplification within the classrooms. So many of the gym classes are now incorporating technology into their spaces, which is really exciting, giving the students more capabilities. We've got wall-mounted gym boxes for those after-hour events, and also we utilized it any time for the emergency communication plan. And our ERP project is underway, and the business case is completed, and we're still working on the planning stage for that. And that is our quick little overview with some of those photos from our schools. Stop sharing for just a moment, I'll switch on over. And Marina, do you want to share the, perfect. Go ahead and we'll showcase our status at a glance. So this is going to give a little bit more context to where we are currently at in our process. Also in your documentation, there is the link to our website for the Bond 2020 Tech. That is our main way that we are communicating out with the public for the schedule, as well as that video that you just saw and milestone throughout here. Okay, so now as we dive on in here, you are going to see a couple things of note. The scope and budget are indeed in the caution section. So when we started to dive into Bond 2020 Tech, there was, as we just saw, the technology earmarked for each of the different classrooms, but we added in, and we've been asked to add in some additional scope. So one example that we've previously talked about was the whiteboard projection screen. Our scope-wise, last year, a year ago, we have switched over to the projection screen, the pull-down type that you see at the front of the classroom instead of the whiteboard scope. And so our schedule has shifted a little bit. It is in that impacted side of things from that original whiteboard shift in scope and then also schedule. So having the shipping delays that we saw a huge shipping delay. So we bought a lot of inventory really early on to be able to mitigate that. And so one of those other things that are at a caution level is our budget. So we currently have 3 warehouses for the amount of equipment that we have. And a large portion of that is actually our whiteboards that we ordered. So that shift in scope has impacted our schedule as well as our budget. We baselined for our schedule. So we are now earmarked for Bond 2020 Tech installations through June 2029, which is different than when this project was originally scoped out timing wise. So that is why you're seeing that schedule impact in the red. There
What was it
are
originally?
2025.
Whoa.
Yeah, and when we are looking at each of the different schools, as we know, there's complexity based on the age of the school, the size of the school, and some of those unique elements. When we start looking at standardizing classroom technology, we want to be able to have that consistency as much as possible with those standards. And one thing that we found when we started to dive into the logistics in each of the libraries, they're completely different than our classroom spaces. So we're starting to individually design those and work with each of those spaces as their own entity, as their own element. And all of the classroom standardization, as Bruna mentioned earlier, is based on our Division 27 specs, the ed specs, and making sure that we have the latest technology that is going to support our students and our teachers across the district. As we have started to implement this new technology, so the new technology here is going to be light-speed amplification, the airtames that we saw in the video. We also have the new gym call boxes. We've created learning tutorials for each of those staff members to be able to get up to speed with some of that as we are implementing it. And as we go through each of the schools, we are looking for those opportunities where we can create that conversation with the school so they are aware of what that schedule looks like. But from a technology standpoint, we are going into our design phase with an open mind and really being able to design it as systematically as possible with our current scope, our current budget. Based on our re-baseline schedule, we're really confident on what that looks like to get back on track.
Back
When-
on track meaning June 29 though, not back on track to 25.
Correct, yeah, there's no way we'll get through all of those schools by next year. But with that 2029 timeframe, it does allow us to spend the time that we need to do the installation. Now, a couple other things that have impacted our schedule is our contracting method. So our contracting method, we went through with IDIQ for our pre-approved list of contractors, and we ended up having very small companies that were certified to install and do the work in our IDIQ pool. So recently, just now, in our school group 4, which we are starting, we are going out to bid with a different contracting method, which is going to allow us to get larger firms that are potentially going to be able to do the work a little bit faster than our current smaller low voltage contracting companies. Currently, for our school group 4 schools, we are going to go with the ITB contracting method, which is hopefully going to get us even more contracting companies to be able to be involved in our projects. And so that is where we are making that huge shift from a contracting method, which doesn't sound like it is too much of a shift, but we're hoping that it's going to bring us a lot more of those contracting company capabilities.
I don't know what ITV is.
So,
You?
yeah,
Okay,
so,
Invitation to bid,
yep,
What?
invitation to
Oh,
bid.
okay.
yeah.
So it's a low
Okay.
bid.
Hello.
So
Oh, it's a
instead of-
little bit. What was it?
IDIQ is
Oh,
basically,
qualification things?
no, it essentially creates a pool of contractors that you then ask them to provide proposals on individual scopes as you move forward. So it's indeterminate data, indeterminate quality, quantity, I think is how it comes down, but it basically just says, we know we're gonna do work that is generally the scope. We don't have the exact details, but we want a pool of contractors that are pre-approved essentially.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so that is gonna be a major shift for us as far as working with larger firms to be able to accomplish a little bit more of that time-oriented projects that we're looking at. Each of our school districts, or each of our schools within our school groupings, we've got about 4 or 5 that we have in each school group so far. So we're hoping that with that ITB, there'll be enough of those projects that they'll be able to come in.
So are the school groups based by where they're located or are they based on?
Great question. Yeah, so I'm actually gonna share my screen one more time. Before I share my screen, actually, was there any questions specifically around scope, budget, or schedule?
Yes, so what did the scope change cost? I mean, what was the difference in budget between what it was before? I guess that was the screens versus the pull down thing, so what did that add to the,
Yeah, great question. So we spent $3 million on whiteboards
that we just have?
that we have. Yep, and that is the dry erase board type.
Right.
So we had originally started with a 100-inch dry erase board that would be installed without asbestos abatement on top of the whiteboard on the teaching wall. And then we did that for our first school, and then we shifted to, based on feedback, to do side whiteboards, and then we also got additional feedback that we actually needed to remove the layers and do the asbestos abatement, and then add those whiteboards back. So that's where that shift, scope-wise, changed last year to that projection screen. Because when we added in the asbestos abatement, patch and repair, and then putting the teaching wall back, we were looking at about $10 million.
10 million, so that was the change of the 10 million.
So
Okay.
that's where we stopped our scope in the whiteboard world, the dry erase boards, and we went to the pull-down projection screens that are going to be utilized with the projectors that are wall mounted.
So you're not gonna use those whiteboards, or you use those?
Great question. So most of our schools currently have whiteboards. One thing that we did once we made that shift is we put that information out that we currently have this quantity, these size of whiteboards available. We let our facilities, FAM know, our FAM team, that way they were able to utilize them in our school district. Also put it on the PPS surplus page, just in case there was a little bit more of that dialogue and communications. And as of right now, we still have those whiteboards. FAM has done several projects. They have utilized our whiteboards for installing at George and then Ockley Green as well. And that is, yep. Oh, yep, Harrison Park is coming up. Yep, they haven't done the install yet. We also will be providing the whiteboards for Markham and the Gray project as well, since that storm damage. So some of the whiteboards are certainly being utilized, but we do currently have that additional whiteboard.
So this current budget at the bottom now is adequate to do?
Yep.
What you wanted?
Yep.
$144 million.
Yep.
So did it come out of contingency?
Did not come out of program.
Came out of program.
It did not,
Oh, it did
no.
not.
No. We have not utilized any program contingency for technology at this point.
So within the scope of the context that you've got here, the bond funds we have listed in its own column, and then other funds, you'll notice on 5515, there's $9,338,927. That was partially from grant funds that we received after we did the device replacement for the students, the 1-to-1, the 2-to-1, and our teachers, our support staff, and our administrator device replacements.
So the technology budget, does that include or not include like Ida Wells or Jefferson?
Great question. So Ida B. Wells, Jefferson, and Cleveland all had their own earmarked projects in the future for full rebuilds. So with that intentionally, we did not want to spend additional money and then tear down the school and Great question. Yeah, so what we did for each of those specific schools was for Jefferson, we improved the Wi-Fi capabilities and the infrastructure there for the current school based on where they're at right now. We did not do the full classroom technology installs because that will be in their new school. For Ida B. Wells and Cleveland, we did Wi-Fi install infrastructure improvement projects, and we did a wall-mounted phone by the door, the classroom wall-mounted phones from a security standpoint. And we have earmarked, so Cleveland, Ida B. Wells, and Jefferson, those were the three. Those are all in our school group 2 schools that we're currently finishing up. Jefferson, we finished the Wi-Fi project. Wells, we haven't haven't gotten a chance to start on yet. And then we're also finishing up that Wi-Fi improvement project at Cleveland as well.
Because the fact is, this school, even if the bond measure goes through, isn't gonna be replaced for like 10 years. Right? Because we're looking at Jefferson late 20s, and
Those are complicated conversations.
so I mean, 10 years from now, the technology, even if you put it in today, is probably not gonna be valid.
There's-
We want to make sure that we have to those key elements, making sure that we have access to wireless
Right.
access, and then
Right.
the door by the phone is a safety concern. And so that's a critical one.
Absolutely.
Along with the backbone.
Yeah, so my point is, you can't afford not to do it. It's gonna take so long before we get these 2 schools done.
We've generally, with with all of our modernizations that are coming up, we've had a lot of conversations about what it is we do to update prior
Get
to
you to.
modernizing.
Right.
With recognizing, yes, that
Same thing with ADA.
modernizations take years in the best of circumstances,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that we need to, sort of prioritize certain things, and maybe other things we don't. But things like security cameras, yes, those have been prioritized regardless of when the construction
makes sense.
occurred.
That makes sense.
I'm gonna share my screen just to go back to your question about how the school groupings were created. So this is our current public-facing website, and it's also on your documentation on the website link that's on that back of that page. So this is available for the public distribution-wise. We have it also translated by the language access team into different languages, so each of those are available for community members to get updates. As we talked about, each of these projects, summarization-wise is here from a percentage standpoint. At the top here, we have the device replacement project that's noted. But down here, going back to that specific question on how did we come up with these school groupings and what goes into it. So it is based on an equity framework. So we have the percentage of underserved community, total number of students at that school, if they are CSI, DSI, or Title I schools. And then we also have added into our scope criteria here the year that the school is built. And that is noted because of the year in which we are going into those schools individually, right? The older the building, a little bit more of that complexity. And so what we did when we started to build out these school groupings, we intentionally put those schools that have the highest number of percentage of underserved community members, the largest number of students, the largest CSI, DSI, Title I schools first. And that's where you'll start to see a lot of these colors highlighted because that's the criteria that we utilized. And those are going to be in those school groupings that are in the first earlier stages. As we go through and you start to see a little bit less of those colors with the highlighting, that is showing you a little bit of the smaller schools or the newer schools. And so that's really where we wanted to get into a lot more of that equity framework. Also from school group 11 until 17 were the schools that had previously had some technology upgrades prior to them, as well as the earlier schools, so the relatively newer schools, so to speak. So that's where our equity framework comes in. And then we also have listed here with the icons of Wi-Fi, classroom tech, fiber upgrades, and then of course our teaching station. So one great thing to note on this screen is we are currently in school group 13, which means we have done the teaching station installations for 63 schools so far. And we still have a little bit more to go. We will be wrapping up those teaching station refresh coming up in November. So we are doing this simultaneously at night when the schools are closed.
Couple things I wanna make sure we address with that, because building that equity framework was important to us. But I want to acknowledge that it was a point in time. So we took a profile of all of these schools in 2020 and built this. CSI, TSI status changes, can change from year to year, same with the demographics of the schools. We are not going back and refactoring that into our construction schedule because that is work. Some people have gotten thrown by that, so I just want to call it out and make sure people are aware. That was a point in time, build out of the equity framework, and it will not change it.
Are there any other questions that I can help answer?
Yeah, I have a question.
Excellent.
The ERP replacement planning, like what's your desired outcome for that spend? Because I remember back from 2021, like the original scope I feel like was the ERP upgrade, and then the budget like came back because they weren't going to move forward with the ERP. So like going through the planning, like what do you hope to come out of when you reach that budget, and like where's the budget going to come for the next phase? Is that like going to be incorporated into the next bond?
So very good question, Karen. Thank you. So the first part, we built enough in the first bond to do our preparation, our early discovery, and get ready to release an RFP, which was deemed non-compensable. So Marina can speak more to what happened on that side from the back end, I think, because there were some finance folks, many of whom were no longer with the district, that did some magic. But we've gone through all of that readiness exercise and development. We've developed, released an RFP, have scored it, and have come up with a winner that we are now entering negotiations with. We're not through negotiations with the intent of, we have some general funds that can provide a bridge to look at. Bond next, hopefully, is the completion funding. So it was never intended for the money that was allocated there to get us through that. It was just to get us started so that we could get to an RFP so that we could move forward.
Thank you. And then I actually have one more question. The 911 call boxes and the phones in the room, that all fell under the technology budget and none of that went to like school security?
Yeah, it was not part of the security scope. The security scope that we've addressed in the district, and I will get part of this at a high level, and what I miss, the folks that are actually doing it, is for access control, the secure vestibules and security cameras. That's out of our scope. We know that's a critical part because we own the phone system and because the call boxes rely on the phone system. We just took that on as part of our scope to make sure we had a mounted phone in every classroom in a consistent place that anybody who walked into our building would know where they're at.
Security.
Got it, thank you.
Intrusion alarm system upgrades and cameras.
Intrusion, there, I think you may have heard there. That's a good part for me to add to my repertoire. All the things PBS is doing to make our students and staff safe.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Good question, Karen.
And I really like the video. Way to go, technology team, for actually making that work.
Way to go, Jody.
Yeah.
It's all Jody.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and head right into modernizations and, well, I'm not gonna read out our status definitions. I share this every time just so you can kind of understand what the basis is for our pretty colors that we put in our status at a glance. I'm showing you a report, first page of the report for Lincoln High School. Mainly just to note that this is
It's a success story.
This
Gotta
is
brag
the
about
final
it.
report. We're not gonna do a presentation on this tonight. You've already seen all the photos,
This is great.
of what it looks like. It's been open.
Yeah.
The school itself, has been- we're in our second year, and the athletic field's our first year. But we will continue to include information on the budget in the program summary. So it is called out there, so you can continue to kind of see what happens with the budget. But there's really nothing else happening with the project, so we will go ahead and dive right into Benson and MPG, and I think it's gonna start with the Benson one. And Armin, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Hi, Armin Milazzo, Senior Project Manager for Benson MPG. Jump right in.
Go ahead and jump right in and make sure you let me know when to go to the next slide.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So as you'll see, budget, equity, and schedule are all in the yellow. I'll talk a little bit more about those in detail as we go through projects and notes in the back. Right now, we're about 80% complete on the construction overall. In November 2023, we realized through a third-party scheduling company that the contractor was misrepresenting what was actually being done in the field versus what was shown on the construction schedule. So as we sit today, they have notified us that they are behind schedule right now. They are telling us that we will open in time for students to be put in the seats. But there's a lot of work that still needs to be done with that. In addition to that, from the financial side, we have had a lot of unforeseen conditions, a couple of 100-year-old buildings, a lot of things found. We've had some struggles with some of the design development on the drawings. And the contractors had some scheduling and buyout snafus that they're working through. All of that to say that our contingency within the GMP for the contract has been substantially depleted. So there's probably going to be a need for additional funding to support that extra owner contingency that we need. The contractor's forecasting that they are going to take on some of that cost in their fee on their side, things that they're responsible for.
The contract had a contingency.
This is a CMG.
Guaranteed maximum price.
That is correct.
And are they arguing over the schedule that it's our fault, they're behind the schedule?
Of course.
But there's
There
a,
are a lot of
I think in the
conversations
notes,
about schedule.
Yeah.
in the notes, you mentioned the contractor contingency, so you're monitoring that or
Yeah.
getting updates on that?
Yes.
That's been drained down. sounds like.
Correct, correct. We have a lot of things that are pending right now. If you include all the pending things, that's what I'm reporting on right now, is if all of those things were to be approved. I'll jump, is it okay to, you want me to stick just to Benson and then I'll come back to MPG, or do you want me to do both at the same time?
You can do both.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, so let,
Whatever's easiest for you.
yeah, I'll just jump, I'm gonna do it in the order of these notes here. So MPG, we are on track to open summer 2024. The contingencies are looking really good there. It's an all-new building. We did discover some stuff in the parking lot, but that's neither here nor there. We don't anticipate any needed funding for that. And all of the amounts that you'll see, the dollars, they do again include those contingencies as if all of the pending items were to be approved. So again, I think MPG is looking really good in that light. Let's see, talk a little bit about the schedule. Right now, finishes are being installed in Benson. We have 11 buildings. So you could imagine that they were in all different stages. We have one building that we are working through our pre-punch list. We have other buildings that are still just coming out of the demo phase and they're doing rough-in right now. So there's a variety of different things happening on the job site every day. And we're running anywhere between 150 and 280 crew on site every day for Benson, and probably 75 to 95 at MPG every day. MPG is, again, doing really well. They dried in, finishes are getting installed. We have power that got turned on last night. And the building has an official new name. It's a Chinook name, and I'm sorry, I'm not really good at the pronunciation, and I won't even try, but you can read it in here. Our risks right now for Benson are really the reduced contingencies that we talked about. The mechanical subcontractor has now stated that they're going to overrun their GMP, and they're looking for compensation from the general contractor for that.
The general contractor.
Stole
will
it
look
for you.
compensation. Possibly.
Conversations are ongoing with that. And for MPG, I think the largest thing for us right now is like any future delays that we just don't know, right? And that's really hard to put any timeline to or put any dollars to. Both projects have had elevator delays for moving in our furniture, fixtures, and equipment. We're working through that. We have our contingency plans in place on how to do that. But again, I think the highlight here is that we're being told that we will have students in seats by August.
By August.
Yes.
Oh, that's right, we'll start in August.
So are they been authorizing overtime and that kind
That
of
was
stuff?
one of the issues I
Yeah,
saw in the
correct.
notes.
That is
They're
one of the
asking-
things they're looking for is more dollars for overtime so that we can move forward as fast as
That's
possible.
only if you agree that you're responsible. Otherwise, it's their problem.
What was the gap in the budget, or the schedule? What was the gap they identified?
Well, that's part of the thing we're working through right now. It's anywhere between 1 week and a little over a month of delay. And we're really starting to weed through what that means. We've had several schedules come from them with several different completion dates. They've also just changed their senior superintendent, to somebody new within the past week. I will say, I think that is a breath of fresh air to some degree. I think it's something that they need to finish this project out. We do have some photos. You want to run through those? Yeah, this is our timeline. I don't know if you want to, any questions on timelines here?
Nope, they guarantee they're gonna be in the seats by next August. That's all I care about, right?
So as you can see here, the campus is pretty much up, right? All the buildings are erected, all the roofs are on. And it is just a very active job site. If you've driven by, you'll see constant activity. We've had lots of tours come in for students. This actually is, the top left is our commons space, so it's adjacent to the cafeteria. Anybody who's been in Benson, they used to be in the basement, and they had like 2-3 windows. So now what they're gonna do is, the bottom picture is the social courtyard that's attached to the commons. So you'll have just this wide expanse of light and space indoors and outdoors for students to gather. This is inside the common space. This is looking from the second floor across. Across what you, it's hard to kind of make out on the other side of the windows, but those are our, oh my gosh, what is it? We have a special name for those. What do we call our stairs?
Learning stairs, yeah.
Learning stairs, yes.
So is this like in Lincoln where they have those stairs?
Yes, where you go up to the gym. Yeah, very similar to that, but a little bit bigger. One of the cool features. Bigger, wider. One of the cool features too is we took the old gymnasium floor and they will actually be put on some of those stairs to be benches as well. So a really nice feature bringing in the old with the new.
You don't have an ADA issue.
No, there are ADA accesses
Okay.
all throughout the building now, and we have multiple elevators as well. This is one of my favorite spaces. This is the historic lobby on the top right. We've maintained that 100-plus-year-old look. We've upgraded it with some glass doors and some glass partitions here to create a secure vestibule. On the top left is one of our classrooms that's getting built out in that same space. And on the bottom left is the main corridor of the Historic Administration Building. Okay. A lot of finishes going in. You can see some restrooms starting to go in. The top left is our auto courtyard that is fully accessible. You'll be able to drive in and around through a secure gate. And the bottom is probably not as exciting, but very technical. This is our chiller room on the bottom left, and on the bottom right will be our boiler rooms. All of those are now in, and they're just starting to do flush and testing. What you see here is a historic running track in our G1 gym. It will be the last elevated running track in PPS. So this has been maintained. The orange and the blue sound panels, those are actually going into the larger main gym as well, up around the walls. Some really cool features on the solar panels. You'll see in the top right picture, that's this typical solar panel. You'll see that throughout all of our roofs as well as on our bike racks. The one on the bottom below is actually a see-through panel, and it's being used in front of the windows that you see on the left. The view on the left has rooftop panels and what we call brise-soleils. And what it does, it's doing dual function. It's creating a barrier for the sunlight through the windows, as well as capturing that PV for solar. Today, we just took those really huge monster dust collectors on the right-hand side, and we put them in place with a very large crane. So very exciting thing for us, 5 years in the making, these dust collectors. So that's a really big accomplishment that happened today. On the left here, you'll see our radio tower. Right now, we're doing some abatement to the lead paint that has been on there. The radio tower will also have the lights that are on there stripped off because they're no longer needed by FAA regulations. We actually fall below regulation, and it will get a new paint job as well. This is Building H. This is our auto shop. This is one of the most fantastic spaces of all of the high schools in the country right now for autos classes. We have garage doors as high as 14 feet. They're able to drive a car in one end and drive it all the way across the building, out the other end if the teacher so choose. We also have classroom spaces in behind what you're viewing right now. So teachers can not only have their shop space, but they can do their classroom time in the same space as well, saving them time. So this is our mock-up classroom on the top left. This is, except for the ceiling tiles that are missing, this is what a typical classroom would look like. Bottom left, you'll see some of the hallways with some of the wood wainscoting going in. And on the right is a typical classroom that has some, this is a typical science classroom that, again, they're just starting to install these finishes. Another one of my favorite spaces, the historic auditorium. The center two pictures are actually of the historic administration buildings, some stairwells and corridors. And the pictures bookending them are the auditorium. The auditorium is going back to be as historically correct as we can get it, which is pretty significant. This Eleanor Roosevelt, I understand, actually spoke at this auditorium, which is kind of a cool fact.
So that's gonna be their main auditorium.
Correct. Correct, yes. This is a camera view in the rain. I apologize, but this is our stairway and ADA ramp access from Benson to Buckman Field. It is now complete and installed, which is another milestone for us. Perfect, all right. MPG, so this is our MPG building. As you can see, this is now fully up. All floors are built out. The roofs are on, the air conditioning units are on, the power is on. It's just a really amazing building. For those who don't remember, this is also a mass timber structure. So our columns and our beams are all mass timber. This would be the east elevation. So they're just finishing up all the metal panels. I'm sorry, no, this is the north elevation. Finishing up metal panels. They're actually done today. So if you were to go out there today, we have a lot more progress than what you see here in this photograph. This was a couple of weeks old. This is the MPG's gymnasium on the left. The black spot that you see up in the roof, that's where the tower crane used to sit. The tower crane right up. So tower crane's now gone. All of the roof structure and the roof itself is now installed. You can see on the bottom right and the top right, these are hallways that are now getting put back together. Finishes are starting to get installed. Again, this photo is probably 2 weeks old, so we've got a lot more progression than what you're seeing right now.
So the ceilings, is that acoustical metal decking or?
Good question. Yes, it is exactly what that is. It is metal decking with an acoustic panel underneath, and there's insulation, sound insulation as well. Typical classroom on the top here, we've got some great colors. You can see the marker boards, the projector screen, and the projector. Bottom right is a science lab, and the left is one of the hallways that is now, again, it's a little further along than what's here, but that is open construction. You can see the wood grain a little bit here as well. So when you're walking in here, you've just got this great feeling of openness because of the wood as well. That's it. Any questions?
Well, you got your work cut out
Oh,
for summer,
Uh-huh,
spring and summer.
uh-huh.
So all this looks cool, sounds like a field trip is necessary.
Yeah.
We're happy to arrange that.
Well, or
Yeah.
more I'm thinking of when we get closer, our meeting, you know, we did the meeting. Yeah, I mean. Business, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It might, in some ways, in the past, it's been easier for us to try to schedule tours separate,
Right,
because often when we're touring, we're not in finished spaces.
right.
So having a meeting at the,
Oh, it doesn't work.
doesn't always work so well,
Gotcha.
but we're happy to schedule a tour if that is something you'd like to do, and it sounds like you would, so
Yeah.
let's see what we can figure
Yeah,
out.
we can go see.
Okay?
Kara, do you have any?
I just want to say, Armand, I was just gonna say, this has been like a massively challenging project, and you show up every time to present with like grace, and I think it's fantastic. And you continue to show up also with some really amazing equity numbers, and I just wanna give you a pat on the back virtually, because like, you're so calm, and it looks amazing, and I drive by it all the time, and I'm very excited to be able to get to tour it.
Well, thank you, but there's a lot of other people on our team that really do all of the work. So they all deserve a pat on the back.
Kudos to all of them. It's just been really impressive to be a part of this committee and see this evolution. So I'm excited to check it out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you, thank you, thank you.
All right, so we are gonna move on to Jefferson, and Steve is gonna introduce himself.
Hello, Steve Efra, Senior Project Manager on the Jefferson Modernization Project. So I wanted to just quickly run back to where we were back in August at the prior BAC. You know, we had just completed the BE workshop. We were getting back on budget, but it really required eliminating phasing that had been previously incorporated into the project, which required having students move off-site during construction. We were running through an intensive target value design process to continue to move towards budget. And really, we were deep into design development, working through that target value design and planning for a swing site. So this presentation is really about what's happened since, which is dramatic, as you can imagine.
Been reading about it in the news.
Yes. So as you can see here, this is won't go over this in a lot of detail, but just try to hit the high points, particularly starting in December. We had the board resolution that directed staff to reassess the current Jefferson site plan, building design, and land use. So Jefferson students would not have to relocate to a temporary site during construction. So to put a kind of even a heavier point on that, this would keep students at Jefferson during the 24-25 school year. And that was really one of the highlights of that resolution, really to kind of commit that to.
It's next year, isn't it?
Yes. So in other words, the prior version of the plan had moved them out at the end of this school year. So there had been a period of time when there was uncertainty about that. And I think that was one of the major concerns, is that we really kind
So
of.
what's gonna happen after 24-25?
So that's what we're about to go through.
Okay.
You'll learn a little bit more about that. So really the resolution was about directing the project team to come up with an updated plan to modernize Jefferson, really focusing on these key criteria, keeping students and staff largely on the Jefferson campus during construction, having a targeted student enrollment of 1,700 students. A critical element is demolishing the 1909 building and building a new building on the campus, and really seeking as closely as possible to conform to the high school ed specs for the area program.
So one that's troubled me is why the 1,700 students? I mean, I'm reading articles in the Wall Street Journal of schools all over the country that are too large, they still gotta be maintained. And based on what we heard when the bond issue was going through, I don't know if there's any scenario where 1,700 students go to Jefferson. We should really draw the districts differently. So,
The board is committed to supporting 1,700 students, and they're looking at what that means in terms of boundaries or other measures. So that is part of the resolutions very specifically. We asked the same question, and that answer came with the resolution, which is to say,
we don't care.
they care deeply about having 1,700
Right, we don't
students.
care, there aren't 1,700
Yeah.
students. And maybe you're gonna get to it, but when we talked before, moving on, staying on site, what took the budget from 360 to like $500 million.
With the prior version.
Program.
Yeah, with the retaining of the 1909. So this is a new approach that demolishes and builds a new. No, it's okay. You're
I
excited.
read your stuff and so on.
Yeah, yeah, you already know the
Well, I don't know the punchline. Punchline.
Yeah.
It's cool.
So really, the plan really directed us to work within the currently available bond funding and also in identifying anticipated budget overage. A key element as well to really establish some continuity and I would say certainty for the project relative to the other Albina district projects is to really, the board basically said that they wanted to really not include any co-location of the Center for Black Student Excellence, Harriet Tubman, or any unaffiliated programs relative to Jefferson. So that also kind of gave some more certainty to the project because there had been uncertainty in the past about that. So really, as you've read, and this has been in the press, these decisions were really tied to strong feedback from the community about their preference for keeping students on site during construction, their preference for that over retaining the 1909 building. So
Which I mean, the 1909 building kind of got destroyed along the way, so it lost its historical context a long time ago.
yeah, and that's a good segue into January and February this year, which is exactly the issue that we have been working with the design and contractor team, and in particular with the city, at looking at pathways towards demolition of the 1909 building. So there are three possible pathways. One is to delist the property from the Piedmont Conservation District. Another is to delist the 1909 building as a contributing historic resource. And the third would be to actually request a demolition permit specifically for the 1909 building. So we're still working through that process, but we've met with the city, looking at a multitude of code and zoning and land use and this historic issue. So we met with, we had an early assistance meeting in January. We had a design advice request meeting in February. So we're continuing to work and with our technical consultants to understand some of the implications of that. So really, I'd say the major efforts that have been underway really since the beginning of the year have been, by the project team, which again includes the design contractor and OSM team, really documenting and understanding all of the site conditions and the city requirements in terms of how we would place the building on the north end of the campus, which was the preference of both of the community and the board. Really digging deep into the potential costs and schedule implications of different site layouts. Exactly how do you put this up against Killingsworth in particular in the north end of the campus? And putting together with the contractor and design team and their estimator a rough order of magnitude cost and a schedule for this revised conceptual plan that would meet all the requirements of the board resolution. So really the next steps are the Facilities and Operations Committee, which would be a draft presentation or meeting March 20th, and then a board presentation on April 7th.
So obviously the hinge issue is the demolition of the building. Is there a high confidence factor that that's could be either one of those three methods?
Yeah, so we have met with them as part of this design advice review or design advice request, all these acronyms. And I think the general direction has been, or I would say, and we came in basically asking the question like, what would, and I think they were trying to help us find what would be the easiest path. And essentially their general direction was that the delisting of the 1909 building, the designating of that building would be the most straightforward path forward. I think partly because I think there was a feeling that the Piedmont Conservation District is actually an important element of that community. So, we can actually sort of maintain that understanding of the building, like you said, has lost a lot of its historic value. And actually, part of what we learned last year during the retained 1909 investigations was we did a lot of work to try to understand what could be undone. And very little can be undone because of how it was done in the 1950s in particular. You try to undo it and you basically damage the building, the old brick facade in particular. So that was part of our discussion with the city as well.
So you're gonna do number 2, request a delisting, and then you'll have to request a demolition permit.
Yeah, so it's a more conventional, it's
Conventional way to go.
120-day delay, and we're still working through all the schedule implications of that.
And so the presentations to the Facility Operations Committee on March 20th. So I guess I'd like to be notified of that, because it seems like there's some impact. We're supposed to be accountable in terms of our charge, and bond covenants.
Happy to share, if the,
Is it a present, the public, since,
if the
public meeting.
Facilities and Operations Committee is a public meeting, it is posted on our website, on the PPS website, under the board section. These are, it's a board committee, we have the board members. And so, they post the date, the time, and the agenda as soon as agenda materials are intended to be available to the committee members, which is typically about a week before. But the date should already be posted. Happy to send you specific date and time, as well as location, which is at our administration meeting.
Are those meetings also streamed, live streamed on?
They're also live streamed, yes.
Okay, yeah, so probably,
Yep.
I think we should probably.
Which is
know
one of the
that.
reasons we wanted to put that on the,
Yeah, no, I appreciate
the
that.
information.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
We have some other things that will be coming in front of the Facilities and Operations Committee meeting that same time. So let's go ahead, they're also modernizations.
Okay,
So I think if it's all right, we'll go ahead and move forward
yeah,
to
we'll come
our
back in.
next one. Thank you, Steve. Which we're gonna have Donna introduce herself. And Donna's also gonna tell me when to move to next slides.
Okay. My name is Donna Pizzaio. I'm the Senior Project Manager for IW Wells, and luckily we get to be right here tonight, so that's fortunate. So we've been working on the comprehensive plan with the design team. We're currently preparing a package for the board, and they will review that on April 2nd.
So it's not going to.
They are,
on the
that's
20th?
coming.
Oh, sorry.
It is gonna go. Yeah, I know. We're bearing the lead here. Go ahead.
Go ahead, I don't know what you were thinking.
We'll talk about facilities comps when we get to the end of
Okay,
the
okay.
presentation, because it'll make more sense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when we talk more about this slide, or can I go?
Nope, you can go right to the
engagement?
Yep.
All right, so we've been doing a lot of different community engagement since October 2023. We've had 5 CPC meetings so far, and the last one is scheduled for next week on the 13th. There's been 3 public design workshops, lots of different kinds of engagement sessions, and there's an open house in April. On the existing site plan, I thought we'd look at this first, and like I said, luckily we're right here. Where if you came in at the main entry there at the south, you came in at the high point of this site, and as you can see, so earlier you could see the beautiful views to the west, which we've been considering in our plans. And as you can see, the building takes up basically all of the eastern half of the site, eastern side, and so we are going to have no swing of students or staff at all, and so we'll be building the building and then demolishing this one. You can see by the site plan there that there's only so many places to build it, and we need to be where the multi-use field and the baseball field are, or you could perhaps put it where the track and field are. The pool in both of our schemes, we've narrowed it down to 2 schemes. In both schemes, the pool remains where it is currently, and that's because the city of Portland Park Parks and Rec owns the pool. So while it is our property, we've had a long-standing arrangement with the city. They put the pool in, they remodeled the pool, they manage the pool. And we provide the lockers and showers that are in the existing building. We'll be replacing those with a small pool sport building. So in our first scheme, we look at keeping the track and field where it is in the grandstands. And in the second scheme, you can see where we reoriented the track and field north-south. I wanted to talk about what both schemes provide first. And the pool stays where it's at. Both obviously be wonderful, new, beautiful buildings meeting ed spec. They both have central commons. They both have north-south pathways. That was very important from what we heard to connect Capitol Highway and Vermont. Let people walk through the campus, and all of the city buses are there off of Capitol to the north. So trying to get that connection as strong as possible. So in scheme 1, you can see a strong north-south pedestrian path there to the east side with the entry to the building on the east side. And in both of these schemes, you'll see parking to the north and south. We felt that that was important, again, after talking to the public. And both schemes will receive new tennis courts, new baseball, new multi-purpose, and improved softball field. You can see the softball field in later slides here. On the next slide, looking more at the comparisons. If we don't move the track and field, it could be a less duration, although not necessarily less construction duration, because we still need to demo the existing once the new one's done, and then move the students in, and then replace those fields to the east side that you see there, the parking and everything. It's where the existing school is. So there would definitely be lower site costs. If we keep the existing grandstands, we'll be providing some seismic upgrades, completely remodeling the bathroom and kind of beautifying the building. The real advantage of the scheme 2 on the right is it really connects and provides a direct visible connection to Capitol Highway for the building. And that north-south orientation of the track that you see in scheme 2 is preferred and advantageous for the sun, for the teams. And then we're also looking into perhaps some improvement for wind. That's been noted as a problem for track events such as javelin. We do have a field specialist that's been looking at the field and the track, and both are in really good shape. They have minimal improvements, and we've had structural engineers look at the grandstands, and that's also able to be saved and used to last a long time, but like I said, does need seismic upgrades. And then something to make it more aesthetically pleasing. But there are people who would prefer to see that out of the way from Capitol Highway and have a better approach from Capitol Highway so that you can really see a direct route to the school. You can see in scheme 2 how they've provided some really nice pathways there, and it's a more aesthetically pleasing approach to the building. In the little bigger scheme here, this is where you can see that softball field is over there by Vicky that would be receiving upgrades such as turf. And in this scheme 1, in the northeast corner there, we actually have other drawings that show the parking lot and the tennis courts flipped, reversed, and that actually does work better to have the parking there on that north-south path and push the tennis courts out to the east far corner. So that's one change that's happened just recently since this slide was put in here. And this scheme also provides, this would be optional, but you can see that there's a drive along the eastern side of the campus, which does exist right now. Right now, it has parking all the way around. On the east, north, and south, you can park along there. This would be narrower, it's just basically a drive. It could just be for maintenance, you wouldn't have to have it at all. Some people have expressed a lot of interest in having that ability to drive through there as you do now. You can imagine, coming to this small parking lot to the north there, if it's full, so we're not creating more traffic on that leaky parking lot or on Burlingame Avenue to the east. So being able to take a route and get to that bigger parking lot to the south could be advantageous, but there are also people that feel that's not necessary.
Nothing happens to the elementary schools.
We would be making improvements though all the way around. The city looks at this as one site,
Yeah.
and so we'll be making improvements to the sidewalk and the curb cuts and everything, probably all the way around there, yes. You can see in both schemes that there are some trees that we've identified and we're trying to keep, if at all possible. The arborist will be providing more information for us, but the plan is to keep some of the large trees wherever possible. One is there in the center to the north. Kind of see where they've planned to keep some green space there. And also where the entry is to the south in this scheme, there's a large tree right there as well. And then I've got some massing views in the next slides. And what it says here actually applies to, most of these points apply to both schemes. Both schemes consider the views to the west and the topography of the site. Both schemes have the track and field close to the gyms and athletics. Both plans minimize the western exposure, so that'll save energy and reduce glare in the classrooms. Both have the classrooms on the upper levels. In this one, it shows a really good view of this main entry plaza, which is to the east side of the building facing the parking lot there. And that strong north-south pedestrian pathway is shown real clearly. You can see it up there by the tennis courts and then all the way to the south, to the southwest Vermont Street. Again, those tennis courts could push to the far corner. Both schemes have the auditoriums close to the main entry.
How many baseball home runs are gonna be in cars?
Yes, we've talked about that and the netting provided and what is this is the best orientation according to the field specialist and the AD. But yeah, we have talked about where are the foul balls going to be then. And then in scheme 2, the real advantage to this one is it connects the building from Capitol Highway approach. And it provides a much nicer approach, and a lot of people have been asking for that.
The entry's still mostly on the south.
Yes, it is, right, and it's, and so while you can see the building, you can see where you're going, we are still directing people to the south. And trying to just increase those pathways and that way making it easier to get around, but the address is off of Vermont right now. It is from this, if you're coming from the south, that is the direction you come, but it really is split. People are going from the north and the south. We're getting some more information on that still.
Takes care of your baseball problem.
A little bit, and then it goes towards the pool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we did talk about that as well. And then the next slide shows some massing. I picked these out because this is where you come in from Capitol, you can see the grandstand there. So here's the existing high school beyond there, and what you do see, and you come in and you see the underside of that grandstand. And again, we could beautify and make that different. And then the next slide, you can see the building pops up. And then in scheme 2, those grandstands would completely go away, and they're just barely visible. There's the little white mark kind of behind that central tree. You see the white line, and that's the grandstands just peeking up. They're taking advantage of the topography again because it steps downhill. And so building those grandstands into that hillside is what they proposed for that. And so you could really imagine being on some terraces at the school there and looking out over into that beautiful sunset we saw tonight. And I think that is the last slide.
The last of the slides. And so now that you've seen 2 schemes, this is why we're going in front of the Facilities and Operations Committee on March 20th. We'd like to get input from our board members on which they would prefer, because one of those schemes costs more than the other. And we do not have funding set aside yet for construction. that is something that would need to go on the next bond measure, or a future bond measure. And so the dollar amount is. you know,
Differential seen compared to the total is.
Pretty small,
Pretty
$6 to
small.
$8 million.
And they may think that as well. And so what we want to do is we want to provide them with both options and understand, you know, kind
I'm
of.
surprised
how-
at this level they can even differentiate that much between two schemes, frankly.
It's pretty large grained look at this.
Well, and I think the only real difference is moving that football field, so it's $6 to $8 million to move the football.
It's mostly in the site work, yeah.
This is not gonna be very,
Yeah,
it seems to me at this stage, I don't know how you pick which one.
The buildings are coming in very close.
The public, the community doesn't have a preference for that.
We're hearing, I think, different things from different people.
Sounds
So-
unclear.
Depends on your priority.
Yes, it depends on your priorities. I think
Connection
that's-
to.
So I think that's
Capitol
where
Highway
we're gonna look
or-
to get some guidance from our board, to help direct us, towards what it is they'd like to see for the master plan.
But I think as anyone, a list of the differentiation, then you can prioritize and some kind of numerical analysis in that regard. I mean, there's some subjective things like the connection to Capitol Highway as you approach it aesthetically.
Everybody's
connection,
gonna
those
have
things,
different
That's kind of a
opinions,
little
so-
more subjective. Then there's things like how the football field works or the track field, and circulation, things like that.
We will be able to provide them the same information we've kind of provided everybody. The reality is that anything that they choose to put on a bond measure, they have to be there to support it in front of the community. So they are our representatives when it comes to bond measures and what's on there. If they want to choose one over another because they feel they can support that to the community, that's, you know, we want to respect that.
Yeah.
That is, you know, a good time to get their feedback. So I do want to do a quick time check, because it's 7:25. We have Cleveland as well. We were also going to do an equity presentation. Avatar has sat patiently through this whole thing,
I'd be here anyway.
but he would be here either way. We could continue and go through it, or we could push it to the next time. I'm gonna leave that up to the BAC if that's,
What are you asking?
on the equity presentation, which was supposed to be our last item. We would go ahead and do Cleveland, so we can get through our organizations. And then we can stay and continue with the equity presentation past our normal stopping time, or we can try to push it to the next one.
You have the information either way. I
Yes.
can just tell you, I can just read it to you.
I read through it and I didn't have any significant questions on the equity part. It's pretty
Okay.
self-explanatory and.
Kara, you have thoughts?
Wrong person to ask. I feel like we should at least run through it because we have everybody here. We started like 10 minutes late, so maybe if we can get through by 7:40.
Okay, let's go ahead, let's get moving through Cleveland and get Cleveland done and see where we are, okay?
Perfect.
Here already.
All right. So, to our next slide, and Hector is going to introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Hector Lopez, and I'm a project manager working on the Cleveland modernization. I'll tell you a little bit about the project today. So, this slide here is not really much to say as it's very early in the process. As far as our status at a glance, everything is going as planned. So we can go ahead and move on to please. Here's a summary of our community engagement. We have hosted 5 comprehensive planning committee meetings with our next meeting scheduled for March 21st. We've also had 2 staff meetings that specifically involved the teachers and CHS staff. We have had 1 presentation for the CHS students. and 2 community design workshops, which both were attended fairly well. We had about 60 people at each of the events. There's also a community survey that's going out right now. It went out yesterday. It's collecting information on how people feel about the historic structure. We have a open house scheduled for March the 16th and ongoing engagement sessions with affinity groups and community-based organizations. What we see here are 4 planning options that we've been studying. Option number 1, we're calling it existing consolidated because it retains a portion of the 1929 building and then adds about approximately 225,000 square feet. And this is all built to the current Cleveland site, built on the current Cleveland site.
Is that building considered a historic structure?
That's what I was gonna ask.
It is a historic resource.
Resource.
Yes.
Got it. The big earthquake will fall.
And here we see option number 2 is a all new construction consolidated onto the existing Cleveland site. Option number 3 shows the existing structure with new construction both behind it and across the street in what is now the parking lot. And option 4 shows all new construction on the Cleveland site as well as partial construction here on the parking lot site. Both option 3 and 4 incorporates a sky bridge in order to facilitate safe crossing for the students.
So you do that instead of going up another level. These are only 2-story buildings, right?
Well, option number 2 that we're looking at right now is we're studying between 4 and 5 stories.
Oh, you are.
Yes.
Okay.
And option number 1 would also have 4 stories behind the existing structure.
Got it. Okay.
So for the options that keep part of the existing structure, here's an aerial shot of the Cleveland site. Everything you see shaded in yellow is what would be demolished and cleared away from the site. And what would be retained here is the north and south wings, as well as what is currently now the front of the building.
How wide is that portion that's being left?
This the width.
Looks pretty narrow. It's just like it's band around there, or is that what I'm looking at?
So that's the equivalent of one of these classroom bays you see here at the.
Basically, you're retaining the facade and.
The facade, a bay of classrooms and what is right now the hallway. And so in order to accommodate all of the space needed for the school, that's where we would be adding the approximately 225,000 square feet of room behind it. So taken from our 2017 education standard specifications, here we see a planning principle of the school heart, which is meant to be a gathering place for the students and staff, and to have the school feel like it's connected, sort of a little community. At Cleveland, what we've heard from the staff and the students is that their idea of what could really be the heart of the school is actually outdoor space that they could utilize. As you can imagine right now, there's very little open space at the Cleveland site, and the space that is open is not necessarily accessible by students. It's more of a loading area. You've got garbage cans back there. So they would really like to see open space on the campus, which has been part of our larger considerations right now in this early phase as to how the site might be oriented or how we can better incorporate open space. Here we have the all new construction option, which has also been identified as our base cost option between 400 and 415 million. And this option is all consolidated on the current Cleveland site. It would offer approximately 17,000 square feet of open space, which is comparable to the plaza at Kellogg Middle School. This also keeps the majority of the parking that is existing right now across from 26th Avenue. And our next option here, we have the existing building with the new addition consolidated onto one site. This does bring a cost above the baseline of about $10 million. And the open space that we would be able to create here would be approximately between 9,500 and 10,000 square feet, which is comparable to the turf area behind Grant or the entry plaza at Franklin.
The red building is the existing. That's nice.
So these would be the auditorium and the gym.
Got it.
In red and sort of maroonish, and the existing would be the light gray around the perimeter.
Like the white.
Yeah,
Oh,
kind
on
of
Franklin,
white.
so
Yeah.
not
So
on,
it's just-
not
it's
on
a-
Powell.
Not on Powell.
Okay. Oh, yes.
It's just a little strip.
Yeah, and it's on Franklin, it's not on Powell where everybody sees it. Okay.
Well, wraps around,
It wraps around.
Oh, wraps around, yeah,
then returns
but not all the way there.
back to the red building.
Not too,
So the front door is, if you're coming up,
got it.
Powell is cheerfully obscured by the Burtonville. So,
Yeah.
so our next option is also the all-new construction with a portion of building built across the parking lot. It is 25 million above the baseline. And this option would give us about 25,000 square feet. But we do lose quite a bit of parking by adding a structure across on the parking lot.
Do you have a parking requirement? City of Logan doesn't have it.
There are parking requirements, but they're significantly less than the parking desired by other stakeholders.
Got it.
Okay.
Like, is there a general, I mean, it's desirable to have parking, obviously, so is there a desirable number or something? I mean, is what other schools have, or, I mean, when you analyze that, whether you get rid of all the parking or have a little bit or a lot more, it's.
Yes, everybody looks at what all the other schools have. Is the best
Yeah,
way to.
if you're a teacher, you're working at Cleveland,
Yes.
whether you're gonna have a parking spot or not.
And people tend to also look at what they have before we
Before they-
modernize, so that ends up sort of impacting people's opinions about parking. It's always something that's challenging to navigate.
Well, many cities are getting rid of parking requirements as part of climate change, so you're on your own.
Yes.
The neighborhood,
Yeah.
everyone wants parking at the school, so they're parking
In the front of their house,
on the streets.
And this last option is the most expensive, 35 million above baseline. It's the option that retains the 1929 structure around the perimeter and also builds new construction across the street on the parking lot, which also has a sky bridge. This option here leaves us with about 17,000 square feet, which is the equivalent of the plaza at Kellogg. So it's definitely the most expensive because you're adding the sky bridge, you're building across the street, and you're having to retrofit and upgrade seismically the 1929 structure.
How many stories is this purple one? Is that 3 stories?
We're looking at 3 stories, yes. In order to maintain height clearance requirements for the sky bridge, we'd have to go up that high.
What's the quality level of the existing facade?
Unreinforced masonry construction.
Because for 40 years in commercial contracting, I can see where it's costing more trying to keep that
Falling down.
this little strip of the existing building, and so, you know, from my perspective, it adds a lot of risk and uncertainty, but if it's a really super high quality facade and there's a lot of sediment,
It's like the old
then
Kellogg
you
grades.
can make a case for leaving it. If not, it's it's a lot easier to not have it.
This is why it's $35 million.
From the design team's perspective, you know, we have not investigated the building thoroughly. We're actually just in our geotechnical exploration phase.
So like, I mean, Jefferson, you look at it, you know, okay, that's not
Yeah.
historic, then, you know, if it's of aesthetically very high quality and in good shape, then there's all those factors that factor into it.
You should ask Phil Mike what he thinks.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a problem with filming.
Okay.
All right, well, that was good.
Yeah, we got lots of
Any other
options.
questions?
So this is also going to the,
So
the.
what we've been doing with both Cleveland and IDB Wells is we've been doing updates to facilities and ops each month. The intent is to bring a comprehensive master plan in front of the board for approval in April, April 2nd, of course. So we will likely see an update at facilities and ops. It won't necessarily be looking for any kind of, you know, specific decision making or anything, but it's just general information. So we do that. It's helpful for us to hear their perspective, so that we can kind of see where we might need to be steering the master plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. We ready?
Let's keep going.
Avatar's gonna talk as quickly as he always does, I'm sure. Holler at me when I need to change.
Next one.
Thank you.
My name's Avatar. I'm the Certified Business Program Manager. I've been with PPS for about 1.5 years. So there are 3 levels of equity. We started with the board, created their purchasing and contracting policy. Then purchasing and contracting kind of went in and did administrative directives to kind of further define the goals. And then I was hired to help implement the program and build it up and create what we're going to talk about. The main item, I think, is the business equity. That the administrative directive set an 18% goal for all of our projects across the board. Doesn't matter how big or how small, we just do 18%. Then the main thing is participating in certified business advocacy groups. So there's 4 partners that we work with to help their members find out about opportunities and technical assistance and stuff. RFP writing, you know, the PNC created, you know, proper language to help drive our goals, but they're goals, they're not requirements because we have to be race and gender neutral. Next slide. We accept following certifications as COVID for an 80% goal. So Oregon has COVID, which is minority business, women business, service disabled veteran, which is soon going to be changing to just anybody who's a veteran, and then emerging small business. Washington has minority business and women business, and then federally there's a DBE program that we accept for Oregon, Washington, and California. Next slide is, so these are the things we're going to kind of talk about. These are kind of our strategies and kind of categories. So outreach and engagement, contracting on the job, training and technical assistance, and data analysis. So our outreach and engagement, we have flexible service contractor pools, so that's work that's under $100,000. So there's less competition with big companies, and it's really good for small companies to get their foot in the door, learn how to work with government agencies, and work on stuff that's the right size for them. When I'm talking to companies, there's a lot of talk about partnerships and joint ventures, either with each other as small businesses so they can work on bigger stuff, or more so with the big prime contractors, partnering with them on our projects, like Jefferson. Anderson Construction hired 5 certified companies to work even on the pre-construction phase of stuff, so they're involved in more of the process than they normally get to be involved with. My job is going to membership meetings, so those 4 organizations that we partner with, OAMI, NAMEC, BDG, and Latino Build. I'm was just at a NAMAC meeting today, just before I came here, so that's why I was a little bit late. So those are, most of them are monthly basis. Latino vote does quarterly.
Are these just like membership meetings or are these companies that go to these?
Yeah, so agencies, prime contractors, and then the members all get together, talk about opportunities they have, do a little bit of networking, meet new companies. You know, I create a database with all the companies that I come in contact with, so when we're looking for certain things, I can go down and look and remember who I'm looking for, or when we have bids that come out, I'll notify companies, you know, what we have that they might be interested in.
Like NAM is National Association of Minority Contractors.
Yeah.
So you have contractors, subcontractors. People are all local members.
Yeah, most of them are contractor related, but the OAMI does a little bit broader where there's more than just construction. They just they're a little bit more broad in their outreach and what they're looking for. I've been hosting targeted member meetings, so at these same organizations, instead of meeting with other agencies and prime contractors, I just kind of host my own meeting so that people can come and learn specifically about PPS and what it is, what projects we have out on the street. So it's just a little bit more targeted for PPS specifically, and a little bit more of a deeper dive where I can talk a little bit longer and give a little bit more information. So whoever wants to come. A few of these organizations have trade shows, so we go and we set up a booth and have people come by and talk to us. Project managers come and talk for a little bit, and specifically if they have projects that are coming up, we like to get people who have something coming down the line. For that, there's 2 or 3 of those that we attend a year. They're kind of growing. There might be some more coming up, but. And one of the big things that I've started is Contractor Spotlight. So we have a contractor come at our monthly meeting where all the PMs get together and they come and spend a half an hour talking about their company. 10 minutes roughly for a presentation, then a little bit of time for Q&A. So they can ask us questions, we can ask them questions, and our PMs can learn about companies out there, and our companies can kind of learn about what it is we're looking for and hopefully make some connections. Another thing that we have is an open house. We've only done one so far. We're looking at having them twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring. So we have our PMs there. We invite some of the prime contractors that are working with us to come and have a table so that businesses can come and talk with the prime contractors for subcontracting opportunities and talk to our PMs for direct work. And then the last thing for the outreach engagement is Certified Business Advisory Committee. We have I think there's 7 or 8 businesses and people from the organizations that we partner with that come and, again, kind of learn about these things that we are doing and give us feedback on if they think it's a good thing, a bad thing, pros and cons. We're looking for some more. We kind of have this on pause right now because we're looking to increase our membership a little bit so that we make sure we have meaningful meetings. Next thing is contracting practices. So we look at how we align our language in our RFPs and our bids to drive the message of equity. Evaluation criteria, that's specifically for the RFPs, like how do we evaluate and give proper points for certified businesses. Direct awards, we just became able to direct award to $25,000 and less. It used to be $10,000 and less, so everybody's excited about that, I think. That is going to help with some of our equity numbers. They were already pretty good at the lower levels for smaller businesses. That's what they're looking for. But welcome communication. So I started companies when they win an award with us. I sent out a welcome letter that kind of talks about the things that they need to do around equity and kind of just instills and reinforces the idea and what we're looking for as far as the business equity, workforce equity, and then also the career learning. Gives them a little bit of guidance for them and their subcontractors that are on board. On the job, we have a respectful workplace program. That was one of the first things I did was with the Jefferson modernization coming out, so we wanted to get the respectful workplace program on that RFP before it went out. So all of our CMGCs going forward will likely have respectful workplace program requirement in the contract. Training and technical assistance, I kind of just do one-on-one sessions right now with people so that I can just help them however they need to be helped. If they want to bid, if they have questions about the bids, the RFPs, how to write an RFP. I've thought about doing other ways, but just right now it's kind of one-on-one just to be able to address anything specifically that they need. Data and analysis, you all are aware of this. It's kind of what we talk about normally. So we have a yearly report that we give to the board. We have our quarterly reports that you all get to see. The board also gets to see those. Our Facilities and Operations Committee also sees the quarterly reports. And then we are working on getting all this information on our website so that we can talk about all these things that I'm addressing right now. And then we can also show people our equity numbers, which will kind of go along with what we show the board and what we show you guys so that it's just out there for people to check in anytime they want to. Talk about a few successes recently. The flexible service contractor pools, previously we were awarding around 25% of the companies to certified businesses, and through my outreach and engagement, we've been able to get that up to 41%. And the roofing one just closed, which is going to push it up to 46% if it gets approved, which it should. The contractor spotlight, we've gotten 16 of the 13 contractors to find work with us. And then new companies working with PPS, we've got 10 new companies from the FSCPs, 6 from quotes, 3 from direct awards, and 2 from bids. And actually at the meeting that I was at, we heard about another one that we were able to get. They're going to install some of the projectors that the IT people were talking about just recently. So, and that is it.
Good job. I mean, the numbers are looking good in terms of the report we get, so clearly doing something.
So the larger contractors like Anderson and Hoffman, do they have like a senior level position that's focused on equity? Is that the person you could work with on bigger projects?
Yep, absolutely. The big companies, the big modernizations, in general, they do a good job. And then also the smaller dollar value stuff, those are $100,000 and less. We do a really good job. We're at, 40-something% awarded to certified. It might be, 35 to 45, whatever the number is. And then it's that gap in there that's like $1 million up to like 25 million. That's the area that the companies don't have that person out there doing that work as much. They're in that little no man's land where that's where we see the most issue with hitting those numbers.
So the Benson one and MPG, they're getting near the end of the line. They're still just a little dull. I mean, they're close.
Yeah, and every time I look at it, there's times when I look at it that it's at 15%, and then I look at it again, it's at 20%. It's all over the place, right?
Yeah, sure, because of the reporting
it's-
mechanism.
yeah.
It's so big.
Does it usually trend up towards the end of the job, or does it, is there any?
No, because it's based on invoices paid.
Right.
Right,
Right,
that's what I'm
so
saying.
depending on where your certified businesses fall within different trades, it could vary
Each
project, depending
is-
on.
Yeah.
throughout the course of the
Yeah,
project. And it could go from 5 to 20 to 12 to,
I mean, we
because
look
it's
at,
all percentage
The
of the
site
work to
guy would be
date.
high early, and if it's mechanical, electrical is the bulk of it, and.
Yes,
later.
exactly, yeah.
I mean, we look at Lincoln, at the end of the day, we did it.
Yeah, and I think what I think Armin is gonna tell you is that they can give you some predictions about where they think they're going to end. And those predictions are probably closer than our numbers in the middle, right?
Yeah.
So am I right, Armin?
Absolutely, I agree, and like, we have final cleaning coming in, which will be a minority contractor, that's not even represented
Right.
yet in those numbers. The other thing to recognize too is the budget is so large, 1% is $4 million
Right.
of that budget. So that percentage is really harder to achieve on a project that big. So getting to that goal is really amazing.
Right, no, I agree.
I also want to plug the open house that Avatar did. We had an unbelievable outcome. The turnout was incredible. We had well over 100 people there. It was
Yeah, we
packed.
had like 130 or something like that.
It was packed shoulder to shoulder. It was great. So.
All right.
Great, thank you.
And if that's all, if we have any final questions?
Well, you can't tell us, but I know you're leaving, so are they advertising for your position?
Yes, advertising has occurred. I believe an offer is in the works. But beyond that, I have no other information. I think if all goes well, then you will see a new face at the next meeting in May.
So there'll be a little overlap.
Yes, the intent of that was to have some overlap because there's a lot of complexity, I think, and there's the technical piece of project management that's consistent across the board. But then there's the overlay of what happens at BPS and how we do our project management, the systems that we use, all those sorts of things. It's helpful to have some overlap. So that's what we arranged for.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Drive safe, Kara.
Drive safe.
Thanks. Thank y'all for the flexibility. Yes, I really appreciate the hybrid meeting approach and nice to have all the equity presentations.
Thank you.
So I get to say meeting is yours.
All right, thank you. Good night.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a
Yeah,
good evening.
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you whenever that tour happens.
Yeah.
First drink instruction. See you.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of our architects are getting biased to how we do things and reference for Jackson.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Actually, you're
I also, so driving, but you're lucky. We're just into the, I'm in the street. So. It would have.
Is this the extra?
Yeah, it's Darren's.
Because so the company that came out